Hi and welcome to another Jesmonite video. Today we're going to show you best practices in terms of keeping air bubbles away from your creations. We're going to go over a few different methods in this video. I hope it's useful to you. First, we're going to go over the best methods of brushing in and making sure that air bubbles are removed if you're doing a solid colour. Again, if you're doing a technique like marbling or something along those lines, brushing in will not be the technique for you because ultimately you can't marble using that technique. So once your mix is smooth and lump free, it's a matter of loading your brush up with mix and then brushing into your clean mould. It's always easier to load your brush up with mix as opposed to pour into the mould initially, because then you can see the exact amount you need. By pouring too much into the mould, you're potentially overfilling it and then creating air pockets. It's always a good idea to make sure you're getting into the corners as well to make sure that you've removed any air bubbles that might occur in any corners or high sides in your mould. Once you've got a good even-ish layer down, it's always a good idea to pour a bit more mix in on top of that and then fill the mould out. It's always okay to be rough with the mix as well, because if you need to move the mould around and ensure that it's flowed into every corner, it's always a good idea once you've brushed in to just give the mould a tap and a vibrate or a shake. Again, you can never be too rough with the mix or the mould when you're putting in the first coat. By shaking and vibrating the mould, you'll see if any air pockets reveal themselves that need filling. Whilst you're making sure air bubbles are out, when you're brushing in, it does sometimes get a bit messy, so it's always a good idea to just go over the sides of your mould, take off any mix that may have stuck itself to the sides of the mould. Ultimately, it preserves the life of your mould. Even when you're brushing into the mould and putting all the effort into making sure air bubbles aren't on the surface, it's always best practice to ensure that you do every possible step to try and take any air bubbles out. So a good idea is to just tap the sides of the mould, make sure it's moved around frequently to ensure that you're taking out any air bubbles that may be on the surface and bringing them to the back of the mould. Again, you can be quite rough with it, ensuring that you don't spill mix anywhere, but just making sure that you're amply shaking it and moving it. By tipping the mix into the mould and then tilting the mould around, you're in essence gel coating the face of the mould to eliminate any potential air bubbles. Again, as you'll see here, I'm gradually filling it and tapping and shaking and moving as adding the mix to ensure any air bubbles are brought to the back of the product. For some larger, taller molds, it's a good idea to pour in and then shake and tap the mold and move it around quite a bit to ensure that, and again, any air bubbles are brought to the rear. So obviously this mold, you'd pour in, and it's a good idea to pour in increments and just make sure that you're swirling around the mold and making sure that you're face coating as much as the outside of the mold as humanly possible, because if you're backfilling large amounts at a time, you'll find that that's when air bubbles occur. Thank you for watching. I hope this has been useful and you've picked up some really useful tricks and tips in terms of keeping air bubbles away from your creations. If you have any more questions in relation to products or best practices, feel free to leave them below and we'll make a video on them when we can.